During the quarterly review on the CEO's first morning, he lifted a hand and cut straight through my sentence like he was flicking off background noise. "Daniel," he said, cool and casual, like we were talking about catering instead of my career. "We don't need to see any more of that." The room went quiet in an instant. The projection behind me froze on a slide showing 12 years of client retention curves, the kind of graph that had kept this firm alive through 2 recessions and a pandemic. Around the table, people shifted in their seats. No one met my eyes. No one met his either. He leaned back in the chair at the head of the table, the chair I'd occupied for the last 7 years, and laced his fingers over his chest. "Let's not drag this out," he said. "You're fired. Security is waiting outside. Close your laptop, turn in your badge, and consider this your last day here. No build-up. No thank you for your service. Just a clean execution in front of the entire senior team." I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I closed my laptop slowly, the click echoing in the wood-paneled room, and straightened. Then I looked him in the eye. "All right," I said, "if that's how you want to do this." For a second he smiled like he'd expected a fight and was pleasantly surprised to get compliance. Then I tilted my head slightly. "Ethan," I added, voice calm, almost bored. "Your biggest account's just canceled. You might want to check your phone." It was like I'd reached across the table and slapped him. "What?" he snapped. "Your phone," I repeated. "Check it." He picked it up with an irritated flick of his hand, the way you might humor a child insisting there's a monster under the bed. The screen lit up. His face changed. First came confusion, that tiny frown as his brain tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Then shock, as line after line of new messages flooded the notification bar. Then fear, raw, unfiltered, as he unlocked the screen and started scrolling, his thumb moving faster and faster as if speed could somehow reverse what was already done. Around the table, other phones appeared. Priya, our CFO, went pale as she skimmed her inbox. Tomas from operations whispered something under his breath that sounded a lot like a prayer. At the far end, the board chair, Elaine, stared at her tablet and then at me. "Daniel," she said slowly. "What is this?" Ethan didn't answer. He was still scrolling, the tendons in his neck standing out. "What did you do?" he finally choked. I picked up my laptop bag and slid the computer inside, taking my time. "I didn't do anything," I said. "Clients decided where they wanted their money managed. I just happened to be the person they trust to manage it. I let that sink in." "Look again," I added. "Read the subject lines." He glanced back at the screen. "Notice of termination. Transfer of assets. Reassignment of advisory relationship." His lips moved as he counted. 17, he whispered. 17. 18, Priya corrected hollowly, eyes still on her own screen. "There are 18 anchor relationships. 312 million in assets under management, gone in less than 10 minutes. The look on his face in that moment is what stays with me. Not his earlier smugness when he cut me off mid-slide. Not the forced little smirk when he told me I was done. That look, when he realized firing me wasn't a show of strength, it was the single dumbest move he could have made. That look was worth every late night, every quiet contingency plan, every care I'd taken not to tip my hand too early. It was the look of a man discovering that the foundation he just kicked out from under the company had my name written all over it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and show you how a brand new CEO walked into a firm he didn't understand, swung an axe at the wrong neck, and managed to get his own head put on the block before lunch. Before that, though, do one thing for yourself. Hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and tell me if you've ever had a boss who thought they could replace years of experience with a slide deck and a couple of buzzwords. Because once you see how this played out, you'll never look at strategic restructuring the same way again. My name is Daniel Ross. I'm 52 years old. I spent 16 years turning Horizon Equity from a name no one had heard of into the firm that handled the quiet money nobody talked about in public. By the time all of this happened, I personally oversaw relationships that generated just over 300 million in annual revenue. Long-haul, conservative, boring money. The kind that keeps a business alive when the shiny stuff goes up in flames. In other words, I was the backbone. The problem is, people who have never broken a bone don't appreciate spines. 6 months before Ethan tried to make an example out of me, I sat in the same office I'd occupied for years. A corner room with a view of the city and a wall full of binders that meant more to me than any art, and opened an email that told me everything I needed to know about what was coming. Subject: leadership transition. That's a phrase you learn to fear in this business. I clicked. Please join us in welcoming Ethan Cole as Horizon Equity's new Chief Executive Officer. I read it twice, then a third time. Our existing CEO, Malcolm, hadn't said a word to me about stepping down. There had been rumors, sure, someone that senior, that long in the seat, always has an exit rumor attached, but nothing concrete. We'd had coffee the week before. No mention of replacements. The email went on. Ethan joins us from Archer Low Capital, where he led their operations through a period of transformative institutional growth. Transformative. Institutional. Growth. Those are good words on investor decks. They're terrible words when your firm's survival has always depended more on Friday night phone calls from nervous founders than on presentations to pension funds. I kept reading. Wharton grad, decorated operator. Previously at firms A and B for 3 years here, 2 years there, 18 months somewhere else. Upward trajectory. No roots. I clicked the link to his LinkedIn. Perfect headshot. Short career stops. The kind of resume that looks amazing on paper and leaves chaos in its wake. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My assistant, Claire, knocked on the frame of my open door. "Daniel," she asked, "do you have a second?" "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and lowered her voice. "You saw it," she said. "I did," I replied. "They didn't talk to you first?" she asked. "No, that's not good." "No," I said, "it is." She sat down across from me, brow furrowed. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked past her out at the skyline. 16 years of traffic, seasons, economic cycles, I'd watched all of it from this window. "First," I said, "I'm going to see what kind of man he is." "And second," she pressed. "If he's the type I think he is," I said quietly, "I'm going to make sure I'm not standing under the chandelier when he starts swinging." She exhaled slowly. "I've seen this show before," she said. New guy comes in, starts talking about disruption, decides anyone who's been here more than 5 years is dead weight. "You and me both," I replied. She hesitated. "Do you think he's going to come after you?" she asked. "If he's smart," I said, "he'll leave the one part of this place that actually works alone." "And if he's not smart?" she asked. I looked back at the email, at the phrases transformative growth and new direction. "If he's not smart," I said, "then he's exactly the person I've been preparing for." She blinked. "Preparing?" she repeated. I smiled faintly. "Let's just say I don't like surprises," I said. Truth was, I'd started planning for this the day Malcolm came back from a board offsite with a tightness around his eyes I'd never seen before. "We're bringing in consultants," he'd told me. "Strategic review. Consultants don't come to validate what you're already doing. They come to justify change." The first time a fresh out of MBA kid walked into my office with a slide that labeled my entire department, legacy, revenue, low growth / high dependency, I knew exactly how the people upstairs were starting to think about me. So I went home, sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, and wrote 4 questions at the top of the page. Who really owns these relationships? What do my clients say when someone asks who their advisor is? What happens if the logo on my business card changes? And what can I do legally and ethically to make sure my loyalty stays where it belongs? By the time the board announced Ethan, those questions weren't scary anymore, because I already knew the answers. He arrived 2 weeks after that email. You can learn a lot about a leader in their first hour. He didn't walk the floor. He didn't stop by offices to listen. He didn't ask to sit in on client calls. He staged a performance. All hands meeting in the glass atrium. Staff squeezed along the balconies. He stood halfway up the floating staircase with a wireless mic and a confidence you don't get without years of applause. "I'm thrilled to be here," he said, teeth bright against the backdrop of the city. "Horizon is an incredible franchise with a rich history, but we all know the industry is changing and we need to change with it." Buzzwords flowed like water: velocity, agility, scale, data-driven insights, institutional footprint. Every few sentences he peppered in phrases like our legacy book and traditional relationship models. Nobody said the words Daniel or your team, but they didn't have to. I knew exactly who he was talking about. At one point he said, "We're going to reduce key person risk across this firm," and his eyes swept the room, landing on me for just long enough to send a message. I didn't look away. Afterward, as people filtered out, he made the rounds. Handshakes, shoulder squeezes, a word here and there about being excited to collaborate. When he reached me, he flashed that perfect practice smile. "Daniel Ross," he said, "I've heard a lot about you." "Likewise," I said. "Welcome to Horizon." "I'm looking forward to learning from you," he said. "You've been doing this a long time." That was not a compliment. His first one-on-one with me happened the next day. "Daniel, come in," he said, waving me into the CEO's office that had been Malcolm's for nearly a decade. The framed stock certificates were gone. In their place, abstract art, a giant whiteboard with arrows and diagrams, and a glass shelf full of business books with words like disrupt and reinvent in the titles. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk but didn't sit. He paced slowly, tablet in hand. "I've spent the last 48 hours buried in numbers," he said. "And your business is fascinating." "Fascinating how?" I asked. "On one hand, phenomenal retention," he said. "Your clients almost never leave. On the other hand, extremely high concentration. A huge chunk of our revenue is tied to a relatively small number of very large relationships, all dependent on one man." He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "You," he said. "That's one way to describe it," I said. "The other way," he continued, "is that we are massively overexposed to key person risk. If you get hit by a bus tomorrow, this firm takes a catastrophic hit. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, a lot of people I've known for 15 years lose someone they trust," I said. "The firm would be the least of the tragedies." He waved that off. "I'm talking about risk," he said. "About scale, about the future." He tapped his tablet. "These clients," he continued, "were built on in-person meetings, late-night phone calls, hand-holding. That made sense in 2008. It doesn't in 2025. We need digital touchpoints, automated engagement, platform-based intelligence, things we can scale. They're human beings, not user accounts," I said. "They didn't choose Horizon because of our platform. They stayed because when markets went sideways at 2 in the morning, someone they knew picked up the phone." He gave me a patient, condescending smile. "Daniel, I get it," he said. "You're old school, and there's value in that. But the next generation of wealth doesn't want phone calls. They want dashboards and notifications. We have to evolve. Most of my clients are the people who built the wealth the next generation is inheriting," I said. "They still want phone calls." He set the tablet down, rounded the desk, and leaned against it. "I'm not here to argue philosophy," he said. "I'm here to execute strategy. And the strategy is this. We're going to standardize outreach, reduce dependency on any one advisor, and reassign a chunk of your accounts to a team-based service model." "In other words," I said, "you're going to take relationships I've spent 16 years building and hand them to people who weren't in the room when those relationships were forged." "In other words," he replied, "we're going to make sure no single person can hold this firm hostage." There it was, not just fear of risk, fear of power he didn't control. He straightened. "I need to know you're on board with this," he said, "that you're not going to resist change." "I'm on board with doing what's best for clients," I said carefully. "That's not what I asked," he said, his voice cooling. "Are you on board with this strategy?" We held each other's gaze. "I'll execute whatever approach leadership decides to pursue," I said finally. "As long as we're honest about the risks we're taking with human beings, not just with numbers on a page." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good," he said, "because big changes are coming. And people who can't keep up aren't going to like where they end up." When I walked out of that office, I knew 3 things for sure. 1, he was going to implement his plan whether it made sense or not. 2, he was going to use any turbulence as evidence that old ways weren't working. 3, when the dust settled, he'd point at me as the obstacle and cut me out, publicly, to send a message. I'd seen this movie before. The difference this time was that I wasn't going to be the one left in pieces at the end. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a notebook and pulled up a spreadsheet I'd been maintaining quietly for months. 43 core client households. Total assets under management, just over 300 million. Average relationship length, 11.5 years. Mean age of primary contact, mid-50s. Number of crises navigated together, too many to count. I went line by line and asked myself the questions that actually mattered. If Horizon vanished tomorrow, would this person follow me? If I called and said, "I'm moving, here's why, here's what it means for you," would they take that call? Do they trust the firm or do they trust me? By the time I reached the bottom of the list, I knew the answer. The logo on the statement said Horizon. The name in their phone said Daniel Advisor. There's a rule I've repeated to junior staff for years. In this business, contracts keep you out of court. Trust keeps you in business. Contracts can be broken. Trust just moves. I opened my contacts and scrolled through the names I knew by heart. Then I did something that would either save me or destroy me. I called Mark. Mark Adler had been my roommate in college before he went to law school and spent 20 years becoming the kind of employment attorney big firms paid a lot of money to keep on retainer. He picked up on the third ring. "Daniel," he said, "it's late. Don't tell me you've decided to go to law school at 52. "Haven't sunk that low yet," I said. "I have a hypothetical for you." "Those are my favorite kind," he replied. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone suspected their firm was going to push them out, and that someone had long-standing personal relationships with clients, and they wanted to make sure those clients were protected, how much trouble would that hypothetical person be in if those clients moved their business when the axe finally fell?" He went quiet. "You asking me if you can steal clients before you get fired?" he asked. "Asking," I said, "how much control a firm really has over people's free decisions, assuming nobody's stealing proprietary data or lying about anything." "Send me your contract," he said. "All of it. Comp docs, any non-compete, any non-solicit. I'll call you in the morning." At 8 the next day, my phone rang. "So," Mark said, "I've read your paperwork. The bad news is whoever drafted your non-solicit clause was having a good day. It's long and it's broad." "And the good news?" I asked. "The good news," he replied, "is that your non-compete is garbage. Overbroad, outdated, and tied to a jurisdiction that courts stopped respecting 5 years ago. If they try to enforce it, they'll lose." "I still can't call clients and tell them to leave," I said. "Correct," he said. "You cannot actively solicit business away from Horizon while you're employed there. You can't send come with me emails. You can't pitch a competitor, but if they contact you, ask you what's going on, ask where you're heading. That's different. And if I inform them," I said slowly, "that leadership is changing and service models are being altered in ways that might affect them without telling them what to do. As long as you stick to facts," he said, "and don't defame anyone, you're on solid ground, especially if you have documentation backing up what you're saying. And if I have emails and meeting notes showing that new leadership is about to replace high-touch advisory with automation against clear client preferences, then you could argue you have a duty to make sure clients understand what that means," he said, "particularly if they've been relying on your judgment for years. Just don't be cute about timing. Let them make the move." We were both quiet for a moment. "Daniel," he said finally, "what are you planning?" "Insurance," I said. "I'm planning insurance." The next call I made wasn't to a client, it was to a competitor. "Emma Harris," she answered. "You're calling on a Sunday. Either you've finally decided to come work for me or Horizon just imploded." "Not yet," I said. "But if things keep going the way they're going, option 1 might be on the table." "Tell me more," she said. "Emma ran Harbor Point Wealth, a firm we'd butted heads with for a decade. We'd taken clients from each other, but there was no bad blood, just mutual respect." "Hypothetically," I said, because the word had become a habit, "if I were to leave Horizon at some point in the near future, and if a meaningful chunk of my client base decided they preferred working with me over working with whatever digital concierge program Horizon is rolling out, would that be a conversation you'd want to have?" Silence. Then a low whistle. "How meaningful a chunk?" she asked. "Let's call it 18 anchor households," I said. 300+ million in AUM. Sticky money. Long-term, low churn. "That's not a chunk," she said. "That's an earthquake." "Hypothetically," I repeated. "Hypothetically," she said, "I'd offer you an equity partnership, full autonomy over your book, first pick on building your team, and my personal guarantee that anyone you bring over will be treated like they're the most important people in the building." "How fast can you paper that?" I asked. "If this stops being hypothetical with no notice." "How fast do you need?" she shot back. "If it happens, it'll be sudden," I said. I probably won't have the luxury of a long runway. I'll have draft documents on my desk tomorrow, she said. All they'll need is names and numbers. Good, I said. Let's not talk about this again unless I call you with one specific sentence. And that sentence, she asked. It's time, I said. 2 months passed. Ethan did exactly what I knew he would. He brought in a consulting firm with glossy slides that confirmed all his biases. He installed a new CRM designed by people who thought humans could be managed like sales funnels. He mandated an automated messaging system to increase touch frequency. He rebranded my team as Legacy Advisory in a deck that made it clear legacy was code for to be phased down. He pushed through a video-first meeting policy despite the fact that most of my clients despised being on camera. The complaints started trickling in. Why am I getting emails signed Horizon Client Experience Team instead of from you? One client wrote. Who approved this quarterly digital update nonsense? Another asked. I didn't ask for canned commentary. I answered every complaint personally. But I didn't fight the system. I documented it. Every time Ethan overruled a caution, I made a note. Every time a client raised a concern and was brushed aside, I saved the email. Every time he used the phrase, they'll adapt, I wrote down when and where, because I wasn't building a wrongful termination case. I was building an ethical justification. The quarterly review invite hit my inbox on a Monday afternoon. Subject, Q3 results and strategic direction. Location, boardroom. Attendees, board, C-suite, heads of key business units, including me. I sat staring at the invite until Claire spoke from the doorway. Is that it? She asked. That's it, I said. You sure he'll do it there? She asked. If he's the man I think he is, I said, he wants an audience. 3 days before the meeting, I sent Emma a 2-word text, it's time. Her reply came in less than a minute. Contracts ready. Clients welcome. 2 days before, I drafted 18 emails, each one addressed to a person I knew better than some of my own relatives. Each one calm, factual, and registered somewhere between warning and reassurance. I told them leadership had changed. I explained that service models were being adjusted in ways that might not suit their preferences. I reminded them that my commitment was to them, not to any one logo. I did not tell them to leave. I did remind them that they had choices, and I gave them my personal number. Again, the night before the meeting, I barely slept, not because I was afraid of losing my job, because I'd already decided I wasn't going to let this man take my work and twist it into something ugly before tossing me aside. Either way, my time at Horizon was ending. The only question was how much damage he would be allowed to do on his way out. The answer, as it turned out, was 15 minutes. You already know how that meeting started. You know how it ended for me. Laptop closed, chair pushed in. One last line over the shoulder. Those security guards you hired for me. You might want to keep them handy. In about a quarter of an hour, someone's going to ask them to walk you out instead. I left the boardroom to a chorus of buzzing phones and hushed voices. In the hallway, the 2 guards watched me approach. You escorting me? I asked. Carlos, the older of the 2, shifted awkwardly. We were told to wait, he said. But honestly, Mr. Ross, I think they're going to be too busy upstairs to worry about you right now. Then we'll call it even, I said. I went to my office for the last time. It's funny what you choose to carry when you know you're not coming back. I left behind the company awards, the etched glass nonsense, the leather-bound binders with Horizon's logo embossed on the cover. I took the photo of my kids at the beach, the crooked little mug my daughter had made in art class 15 years earlier, the framed note Malcolm had sent after we'd navigated 3 of our biggest clients through the 2008 crash, to Daniel, who kept more people calm with a telephone than our entire trading desk did with their models. I put them in a box, locked my desk, and walked out. In the parking lot, I sat in my car with the engine off and my phone in my hand. It took about 4 minutes. 9:41 a.m. Claire. What did you do? Ethan is losing it. Priya looks like she's going to throw up. Elaine just called a closed session. 9:48 a.m. Emma. All 18 transfers confirmed. Welcome to Harbor Point, partner. Contracts are waiting. 9:52 a.m. Unknown number. Mr. Ross, this is Kevin from Compliance. We need to speak with you urgently about client communications. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and laughed. Not a happy laugh. a laugh that sounded more like a release valve hissing after being overpressured for too long. 10:03 my phone rang. Elaine, I let it go to voicemail. The message that followed was tight, controlled, oddly formal for someone who'd known me for years. Daniel, this is Elaine. We need to discuss what just occurred. This situation is extremely serious. Call me back as soon as you get this. I deleted it. A minute later, another call. This time the caller ID showed Ethan's name. I answered. Daniel, he said. His voice, so smooth in the boardroom, was now jagged. We need to fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said. You fired me. The clients made their decisions. I'm on my way to a place that values what I do. I made a mistake, he said. A huge mistake, I'll admit that. Publicly, if I have to, come back, we can reverse this. We'll offer whatever you want. Title, comp, autonomy, name your terms. You fired me in front of the entire leadership team, I said. You called my work outdated. You told them you were removing key person risk. Remember. I was wrong, he blurted. I didn't realize how dependent we were on you. I didn't understand how connected you were to those accounts. You didn't understand that relationships are not line items, I said. You didn't understand that trust doesn't live in a CRM. You didn't understand that you can't publicly humiliate the one person standing between you and a catastrophe and then expect that person to save you. Daniel, please, he said. The board is in there right now. They're furious. They're talking about terminating me. If you don't come back, if you don't help get those clients back, he didn't finish. You want me, I said slowly, to walk back into that building, tell 18 households that I overreacted, that the man who just tried to turn them into data points actually understands them, and drag them back into a firm that showed them exactly how little their loyalty mattered. If you don't, he said, everything we built could be gone. The firm could collapse. Everything we built, I repeated. Silence. You chose this, I said quietly. You had months to listen. You had every chance to understand who actually held this place together. You looked at all of that and decided the best use of your first quarterly review was to make an example out of me. I let that hang. You pulled the trigger, I added. All I did was make sure I wasn't the one bleeding. Daniel, good luck, Ethan, I said. You're going to need it. I hung up. At 11:10, a text from Claire. They just walked him out, security. Same way he planned to walk you out. Whole floor is stunned. I stared at that message for a long second, then typed back. I told him 15 minutes. I was off by an hour. I can live with that. By lunch, Horizon's internal rumor mill had gone external. Trading desks at other firms were buzzing. Journalists were sniffing around. Someone forwarded me a screenshot from an industry Slack channel. Hearing Horizon just lost a massive chunk of their private client book in one hit. Anyone know what's going on over there? I didn't reply. I had better things to do. At 1 p.m., I sat across from Emma in a sunlit conference room at Harbor Point with a stack of papers in front of me. Welcome to the other side, she said. You sure you want the baggage? I asked. Baggage, she laughed. You just came in with $300 million in the kind of capital we dream about, and a story that's going to make half the industry rethink who actually has power. I'll take that baggage all day. We went through the formalities. Partnership agreement, compensation structure, the compliance protocols for client transitions. Just remember, she said, half joking, half not, for at least the next 6 months, if someone asks you in public why those clients left, the phrase is strategic realignment and cultural fit, not because my old CEO was an idiot. I can manage that, I said. Over the next few weeks, the fallout unfolded exactly the way I'd known it would. Horizon tried to plug the hole. They offered retention bonuses to anyone whose book hadn't already started leaking. They rolled back some of Ethan's initiatives publicly, while quietly trying to salvage others. They sent out letters to clients assuring them that service quality would not be affected. They reached out to a few of mine directly, dangling discounts and special teams. It didn't work. You can't tell someone who watched you publicly humiliate the advisor they trusted that nothing has changed. 3 more senior advisors left within a month. Each took a slice of their book. Some came to Harbor Point. Some went elsewhere. It didn't matter. The effect was the same. By the end of the quarter, Horizon's assets under management were down almost half from where they'd been when Ethan stood on that staircase and promised transformative growth. 3 months later, a press release went out. Regional wealth firm to join forces with national platform in strategic combination. That's acquisition speak for we had to sell because we broke the engine and couldn't afford to fix it. From the outside, it looked inevitable. From the inside, I knew it could have gone another way. At Harbor Point, my life got strangely simpler. Same work, different context. My clients, my actual clients, the humans on the other end of all those calls settled in quickly. We had long conversations about the move, about the difference between loyalty to a building and loyalty to a person. Did we do the right thing? One of them asked me, a founder whose company I'd helped take public 15 years earlier. You did what you've always done, I said. You followed the advisor who took your calls at 2 in the morning. That's not just right. That's rational. New referrals started coming in. Friends of my clients who'd heard the story. Colleagues at other firms who'd watched Horizon stagger and thought, maybe I'm not as safe as I thought. One afternoon, my inbox pinged with a message from a name I recognized from my old firm. Mr. Ross, I heard what happened at Horizon. They're bringing in new leadership here now too, and the language sounds very familiar. I've been told my approach is too relationship dependent and not scalable. I'm starting to think I might not be here much longer. How did you handle it when they decided you were obsolete? I stared at the email for a while. Then I replied. First, I made sure I understood what I actually owned. Not stock, not salary, not titles. Trust. I made sure the people who put their money and fears in my hands knew that my loyalty was to them, not to a logo. I documented everything when leadership started making decisions that put their interests at risk. I learned exactly what my contract did and didn't allow. I built a landing pad before someone pushed me. And when they finally decided I was expendable, I let them experience, in real time, what happens when you remove the person holding the structure together. Most importantly, I never let them convince me that experience was a liability. It was my leverage. I ended with one sentence. You're not obsolete. You're dangerous to people who profit when clients forget who actually protects them. Because here's the thing Ethan never understood until it was too late. You can terminate an employee. You can erase a title from an org chart. You can wipe a nameplate off a door. But you can't fire the years spent answering calls, calming fears, explaining markets in plain language, and showing up when it would have been easier to let someone else handle it. You can replace a person on paper. You cannot replace the history that person carries in the minds of the people who trusted them. Ethan walked into Horizon thinking he was going to modernize an old, dusty practice. He thought the risk was that I'd cling to the past and slow him down. The real risk, the one he never accounted for, was that if he treated me like a liability, the people whose money kept his balance sheet pretty would decide he was the one they couldn't afford. He thought firing me would prove he was in control. All he really did was prove exactly how much control he never had. It took him 15 minutes to understand that. It took the board 2 hours to decide he had to go. It took 6 months for Horizon to vanish into someone else's logo. And it took me 16 years to build the kind of relationships that made all of that the only outcome it was ever going to have. Sometimes revenge isn't about plotting someone's downfall. Sometimes it's as simple as refusing to forget where your loyalty actually lies, and letting the people who never bothered to earn it discover, in front of an entire boardroom, what they just threw away. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.